Let's try this again. Guys, jump on here real quick. I need to be able to see your comments. If I don't see your comments, it means I can't see you. And you know what they say. If it's not making dollars, then it's not making sense. All right. I thought you guys were not on. And then I had to cut the live because I just wasn't sure. All right, guys, it's a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes before the news, and before I go home, because I'm about to leave to go home. Yes, all right. I wanted to jump on here very quickly and just sort of sprinkle some SML TV dust on a bit of current affairs and stuff. As many of you know, I heard on the wireless not too long ago that Nkana Independent Member of Parliament, Binwell Pundu, has sort of hinted that he wants to run for president. He's going to contest. The word on the street is that he's going to contest the 2026 presidential elections under a youth movement called Ichabaiche. In Spanish, that would be referred to as youngsters, muchachos, la mujer, young girls, young men, And I have a couple of things I want to say about that. First of all, do you know why Paris, France fell to Nazi Germany in the Second World War? Do you know why? It's because Paris was not prepared. They were just totally unprepared to withstand Germany's fierce fighting machine that was the Nazi regime. Paris wasn't prepared. In the same vein, by the same token, the same in politics. You don't win if you're not prepared. You don't sit at the table of progression if you're not prepared. Do you know how winning is done? Winning is done when opportunity meets preparation. Those two ingredients are absolutely imperative. You must have those two in your bag, in your arsenal to advance, to progress forward. No pun intended. Now, of course, every so often there's a fluke, and I keep telling you that Zambia is past the dispensation of chance presidents. We will no longer have chance presidents, I don't think. I think that the Zambian people have evolved with what politics is and should be. And we've sort of gone into the stratosphere of sort of looking ahead and seeing leadership for what it is. So my point in saying that is, if you're banking on being a chance president in this dispensation, you're terribly mistaken. And which brings me to Binwell. Binwell is a young man that has sort of gone ahead of himself. Now, I know in the Zambian context, you always have this idea that no, God creates the tree, you and I make the furniture, okay? God has given you and I this beautiful supernatural thing called your will, your selective will. Each one of us, you, me, we are free moral agents. And in a democratic space, we select our leaders. Okay, so let's do away with that oversimplification when you say, no, maybe God has chosen it. No. God creates the tree, you and I make the furniture. Now, given Binwell Pundu's political history, the only thing that is most notable about his political career thus far, okay, thus far. Now let me preface by saying this. I'm not saying that Binwell Pundu doesn't have a life in politics. He does. He's young, he's youthful, he's vibrant. So he's got a long way to go in politics. This is not the beginning and end of Binwell Pundu by any stretch of the imagination. But what I am saying is that the only thing thus far that Binwell Pundu has done of note in Parliament is to use sort of, pseudo-unpalatable language in reference to his colleagues in that august house. That is what he is notably known for. And so for a young man to come from that definition of who he is in Parliament to all of a sudden becoming and catapulting himself into a presidential hopeful for 2026 is being disingenuous at best. It's being delusional at worst. Now, hear me when I tell you this, because Binwell has this idea that with the legal issue that's hovering over his head, and you must understand, this is his line of logic, okay? He thinks that because there's this issue hovering over his head, this charge, this thing about seditious practices. Remember when Binwell Pundu called his fellow opposition leaders? He basically made a call to arms. He basically asked his friends, "Hey, listen, let's weaponize ourselves to the hilt. If our opponents are using guns, let's buy guns. When they fire, we fire." I've always said, anytime politics and politicians begin to mix political rhetoric with guns, it is a recipe for disaster. It is a potential powder keg for civil unrest and war. You never want that. You never want two factions or two people, two groupings that are politically divided to start carrying guns and start firing at each other for political ideologies. That is nonsense. That is total, complete nonsense. You can't be fighting with guns over politics. That is a recipe for disaster, and that is the problem that Binwell Pundu has found himself in. Now, here's the issue. Binwell surmises, he deduces, in his infinitesimal mind, he thinks that if I declare my interest in the presidency, and then this case hovers over my head, and I am found guilty or wanting within the courts of law, then that will be equal to political persecution. This is how he thinks. I want you to hear me. I want you to get this. In his mind, he thinks that, well, if I say I'm going to run for president, and we all know I've been going to court for a while about this. Most recently, he was supposed to be at court. He said he couldn't go to court because he was unwell. Oyo Christopher Kangombe, his fellow parliamentarian youth, stood in his stead. You know that phrase? Stood in the gap for Binwell and said, oh no, Binwell can't come to court today because he's sick as hell, and he just can't come to court. A few days later, he was on his live talking about whatever he was talking about, you know. So my point is this. Binwell is going to use this declaration, this premature, unfounded, baseless, foundationless declaration that he wants to run for president, and then he'll turn around and say, I'm being politically persecuted because I am a threat to the establishment. I am a threat to the current government. They want to silence me. They want to stifle my desire. They want to stamp me out. They want to snuff me out because they know that I'm a threat to the establishment. Binwell, pull your head out of the clouds. Mightier men have tread the trail of politics way before you have. Mightier men. There are people like Emmanuel Mwamba. There are people like these other chaps. I mean, given there are people like all these other chaps Not that Sean Tembo is a mightier man. Sean Tembo is the exception because Sean Tembo is a certified lunatic. Okay, so he's not classified as a mighty man. But my point is, mightier men have gone before you and they have declared their desire to be president and they have fallen short. They have. What's my point? My point is this. There's nothing wrong with you wanting to be president, people. But the key is be prepared. Align yourself. Position yourself for leadership. Don't make outlandish statements just for the sake of making them. Ichaba iche? What the hell is that supposed to mean? Ichaba iche. Because if anything, that name has no place in politics because it speaks and smacks of immaturity and a need to grow up. Who wants an immature politician as president? I certainly don't. I know I don't. Okay, I will not, for the sake of this nation, we will not for any moment allow your immaturity and your inexperience to stand on the mountaintop and declare that you want to be president. Ichaba Iche, change that name. Because I can't get past the fact that it says to me immaturity. It says to me unpreparedness. It says to me a lack of seriousness. So my advice to Binwell is position yourself. You have a bright future in politics. For you to suggest, Kuti, as an independent member of parliament for Nkana, that you have the ability and the wherewithal currently in your position in the Zambian geopolitical space, that you and you alone can unseat an established working administration at this time is both foolish and disingenuous at best. I'm not hating. I'm just telling you, be real. I leave you with this thought. Again, I have to repeat so that I cement my line of logic, and it's this. The reason Paris, France fell to Germany, the reason Adolf Hitler triumphantly marched into Paris, France in the Second World War, the reason Paris did not respond to Germany's advances, Nazi Germany's advances, is because they weren't prepared. In the same vein, by the same token, the reason Binwell and people like him will not be president in 2026 is because they're not prepared. What's the lesson? Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. All right, I gotta go. Thanks for watching. Bye.